Welcome to Careers in Discovery, where you'll meet scientists who've forged outstanding careers in biotech and hear about what they've learned along the way. This podcast is brought to you by Singular, building brilliant biotechs. Tomas Dias is the Chief Technology Officer at Mursla, a biotech company using extracellular vesicles to develop next-generation liquid biopsy tests in service of their mission to offer life-saving clinical insights to patients and their medical teams. Tomas talked to us about his path through his career so far, why reliability is underrated and the importance of hard work, as well as how a tennis injury made a clear career choice for him. This week on Careers in Discovery, I'm absolutely delighted to be joined by Tomas Dias of Mursla. Tomas, welcome to the show.
Hello, Tom. Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here.
Fantastic to see you. So let's talk a little bit about Mursla to start with. And if you could maybe give us an overview of multi-omics liquid biopsy and extracellular vesicles in the execution of that. Tell us a bit about what you're doing.
In a nutshell.
Yeah.
So you resumed in a very few words, which is very good, what we are working with. But to develop a bit more on that, the mission at Mursla is to, what we're doing at the moment is discovering novel biomarkers for diseases that currently do not have reliable blood tests.
Okay.
Which are many. We are not only discovering these biomarkers, but our mission is to develop the blood tests that can replace the gold standards that are not optimal. To do this, indeed, we are targeting multi-omics via extracellular vesicles. And these extracellular vesicles are tiny particles that are released from all the cells, and by all cells, I mean all cells that have been studied so far, which are many, so it's not all. And the beauty of these tiny particles is that they contain all sorts of information from their parent cells. So you can imagine in a blood test, if you can find these tiny particles that came, for example, from a given tissue that might be diseased, probably you are accessing a lot of information that otherwise you could only have done invasively, like with a tissue biopsy that many times is not possible and is invasive, which is in any case never ideal. And, it's part of the future. Liquid biopsies are here to stay. It's a new field, but as many other fields progress, this is just another one, and we are glad to be part of it.
Yes, so that's interesting. So that gives you a much less invasive way to test for these conditions, I take it. And I would suspect some of the challenge lies in identifying the right vesicles and extracting them and isolating them. Tell us a bit about that.
Correct. Yes, that is indeed where the field is right now. Maybe you know that, and the listeners know that the field of extracellular vesicles is quite recent. They have been found a long time ago, but they didn't receive the considerations that they deserved at the time. But that's a consequence of the technologies that existed at the time. But from about the 2013, 2014, 2015, this is when the field started emerging.
Yes.
But honestly, still at this period, which is actually when I came around with the extracellular vesicles and exosomes, there was still a lot to be done. And in every field, when something is new, we take assumptions that now we know are not real. For example, we thought, or the field, the community thought that the quantity of extracellular vesicles in blood is so high that you don't even need to focus on the tissue-specific EVs, for example, because you are sampling so many that
Right.
for sure you are also targeting the ones of interest. But then, of course, this is partially true, but there are many particles as well in blood in much higher quantities than extracellular vesicles. And in fact, the reality is that if you go for a specific tissue, and in this case, what we are doing is a specific disease, which doesn't mean that all the tissue, for example, an organ is damaged, but a part of it may be.
Right.
The quantity of these extracellular vesicles that we need to find is very, very scarce.
Yes.
So indeed, this is a challenge which we took some time to address it, and we think we have obtained enough proofs that we did it. And after having done this difficult step, this is when we are now on the stage of discovering the biomarkers. I wish I could talk more about how we are or how we solve that, but this is we are submitting IP related to this topic.
Understood. No, absolutely. We wouldn't want to get you in trouble, Tomas.
But yes, it is indeed where the field is not only for this. DVs are very interesting in therapeutics applications, but in the case of diagnostics, this is the holy grail, how to find the specific EVs from a given tissue in biofluids, not only blood, right?
Yeah. I think it's fascinating. There's always, every time sort of we discover something new about how the body actually works, the range of applications that can create is phenomenal, isn't it? We had a few years ago, we had Tony DeFugerol on the podcast from Evox Therapeutics, and they're obviously using exosomes to deliver therapies.
Exactly.
But there's, I guess, as soon as you understand the mechanism, there's then everybody's going to have different ideas about what you could do with that, and it's
absolutely, yeah. No, exactly, and I think this is how science has always progressed. Knowledge builds after knowledge, and this is it's indeed, and it's just the starting points of the field. To be honest, I think finally we are now understanding what is noise. By noise, I mean what is directions that we should not be focusing on anymore, and the ones that at least might have good outcomes. So, which is a good step, in my opinion.
Yes. Yeah. It doesn't always feel like progress that way, does it? But it's getting rid of some of the extraneous stuff, hopefully leaves you with more of the things that make sense.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you mentioned that you're focusing particularly on diseases for which there are not accurate blood tests or not many effective blood tests at the moment, which, as you said, is a lot. Are there particular areas that the focus is on right now?
Yes. So we are targeting cancer primarily. And for now, that's the only thing we are.
Yeah.
And we are targeting liver cancers for certain specific reasons, but essentially the gold standards are very, very poor. There are imaging technologies, of course, but there are many problems associated with these, and it is one of the types of cancers that urgently needs a reliable biomarker test.
Yes.
That being one biomarker or a panel of markers, but yeah.
No, understood. Okay. Yeah, and I suppose, liquid biopsy traditionally associated with cancer thus far, right? And but I suppose there are future applications in other areas as well.
Definitely. Honestly, it's not only cancer, but I guess cancer, because there is such a strong need, there is also more funding available to finance any developments with liquid biopsies, but it could be applied to many other diseases that are not cancer related.
No, of course.
But yeah, it's for example, something I like to say about extracellular vesicles in diagnostics, and for me, when I found about them, they suddenly made a lot of sense, because before that I was actually working still with liquid biopsies, but with the cell-free DNA. And it makes sense, of course, and there is a lot happening. But to me, genetic factors, what we can find in cell-free DNA is predictive, because it does not necessarily mean that there is a specific expression, which normally is found in the form of proteins, which are the active mediators of cell functions. And it does not take into account the environmental factors, which are very important. And in this sort of tiny particles, the extracellular vesicles, you can access all of this information together. And also, for example, for cancer, it also, besides cancer, it also means that it may be easier to use extracellular vesicles for diseases that do not depend on the altered genetic material, where it's just abundant expression or less expression of certain proteins here and there. And this might open the way for liquid biopsies, but also more targeted to everything else.
No, absolutely. Yeah, it makes sense. Interesting. And so, Thomas, your role there is, of course, as CTO. That's a title that can cover a lot of ground and usually means different things in different places. Tell us a bit about where you spend your time and what you focus on in your position.
Yeah, sure. So my CTO functions, indeed, for example, is not, I'm not, well, although I do, but it's not really my strong suit, focusing on software, which is normally associated with the CTO, but it's more in the sense of technology officer, which is what we are doing at Mursla. We are building technologies for to assess new biological information. In essence, and my responsibility is to lead the scientific teams. So that we can get these technologies progressing well. And not only that, not only on the technology part. To be honest, my role is also of a CSO. I also lead all the scientific aspects related to the disease biology, etc. So I have a very diverse role, but is one of the things I like the most. I really like to feel I'm involved in the most important points whenever I am. And I feel like I'm doing that here, and I'm very happy about it.
Yeah, I think, what I've sort of noticed, whether it's called a CTO or a CSO or whatever the positioning of it is in different companies, that role that sits between the science and the business, I think is probably the most varied one in the business, right? So you're still involved in the research, you're still involved in the technology, but then you have exposure to all the commercial aspects, all the fundraising side, the investor side of things, strategy, and everything else. And I think it's I guess you have to shift gears quite a lot, but
no, that's true. That's true. I need to change from one topic to another at light speed almost sometimes, and it's and my days normally are that, and sometimes I feel I am here on demand because because I need to help in so many different fronts at the same time, but of course, that's not always the case, and I also need my moments alone to also continue certain scopes of the work that I can only do myself, of course.
No,
but yes, it is a very exciting position, and I need to speak different languages internally, to be able to speak with the scientists, being able to speak with the CEO, who is anyway very familiar with the science, but also, as you said, I'm involved in discussions with VCs, etc.
Yes. And we'll come back, I'm sure, to kind of your progression into this role and how you've developed the skills that you need, because your career journey, of course, is intertwined with Mursla's after a certain point. So we'll talk about that a bit more, I'm sure, as we go through it. But I always like to go back to the beginning in these in these conversations, Thomas. And so your background, your training is in bioengineering. Tell us a bit about why science, why that area of science particularly, why this career for you?
You mean from the very, very beginning?
Yes. As far back as you can remember, anyway.
Well, it's quite far back, actually. For example, when I was a kid, I knew I always wanted to do something medically related, but it's interesting that my choices were not, I want to be a doctor, I want to be a biologist, I want to do what these guys at National Geographic are doing. I wanted, it's very fun because my mom, up to these days, always tells this story that what I used to say is that I wanted to be a plastic surgeon at Air Force.
Okay.
And I remember saying this. Which is very unusual, but
specific, yeah.
But yeah, that also comes because I have a passion for aviation. So yeah, but I think now looking back, it definitely says that I had some traits pushing me towards the medical field.
Yes.
And technology in itself, because airplanes is all about technology. It's honestly something I admire. We don't even know in 100% how airplanes fly, and just that is beyond me. It's something that piques my interest.
Yes.
You know? And yes, so moving on to my high school years, I went to a path that led to the life sciences, but at the same time I discovered tennis. And in the space of 3 years and a half, I went from not knowing how to play tennis, never playing it, never having played it, to becoming the number 50 in Portugal in my category and number 10 in Lisbon, which is where I grew up.
Yeah.
So I was very confused at that time of what I wanted to be, because I had found this new passion, tennis.
Yes, I see.
But thank God, at the time I wouldn't have said, I didn't say this for sure, but just before the national exams that happened on that year, when I was just graduating from high school, I decided to go play tennis to unwind, to relax a little bit, to release some of the energy, and I broke my leg. And then I became so depressed. Everything was horrible at that moment, and I didn't get good grades at all because I couldn't study for the exams. I was such in a miserable state that I ended up repeating the year. Found a work at Pizza Hut, but at the same time, that what it gave me was the real understanding that life sciences is where I wanted to go for. I was slightly more mature, and in teenage years, 1 year makes a lot of difference.
It does.
And I was determined. Okay, this is what I want to go for. I have been since always passionate about biology, but during this year, I found that it's not only biology I like physics, chemistry, everything. So, and I honestly could just see myself in a life sciences position. That's what I knew at that point. So yeah, I enrolled in university. I didn't start as a bioengineer. My first studies were in molecular and cellular biology, which was great. I loved it. And in my third year, so the final year of the bachelor's, I got the scholarship to do part-time work at a laboratory. So for the whole year, I was having the classes as anyone, and then from 4 or 5 p.m. to 7, 8 p.m., I was working in the lab, and that was a great experience. But it also told me that fundamental work was also not for me.
Okay.
Because I felt it would always take forever for me to see any impact from what I was doing, to see any impact to the world.
Yes.
It may never come because, I was doing something very fundamental and discovering new biological processes, which is extremely important. But I just felt that this was not where I wanted to go for. And this is how I came around bioengineering. And it's not like a huge transition, but it still was a little bit. I moved to, I enrolled in a master's in bioengineering and nanotechnology, which indeed still strong in biology, but more about how to build devices for biological applications, bioassays, a lot of engineering. So it made sense to me, and that was the beginning. And from there on, a lot happened actually. I don't know. I can tell all about it.
No, so you took that path, and then of course, I would guess at the time, bioengineering wouldn't necessarily be a new field, but it's still a lot of unexplored territory, and still today. In bioengineering,
especially the nanotechnology component.
Yeah. So tell us a bit about what you focused on then, and sort of how things developed from there, and how you ended up coming to Mursla.
Yes. So from there, the masters was very difficult for me, but I don't know if it was the tennis, but I had built this competitive trait in me that I wanted to go for something difficult or something a little bit out of my comfort zone. And this master's degree that I selected was difficult in the sense that first of all, it was a new master's at and in a very good engineering university that, you know, it is in Portugal, but it has it is where the best engineers graduate from in Portugal. Well, of course, there are many good universities in Portugal, and I'm being biased, but that's but still.
That's okay. It's your podcast. You can be biased.
It was difficult because I was having courses, and not only me, my class having courses with aerospatial engineers students, which had a lot of more background in mathematics, and with some electrical engineer students in electronics. It was quite intense. So we had to be at the level of the experts. Well, if we can say a student is an expert, but they were definitely more experts, all of them in electronics, physics, etc., than we were. And that was difficult, but somehow it didn't make me afraid to pursue this further. And then for my PhD, I applied for a prestigious program called MIT Portugal program, which is a collaboration between MIT in the US and the best Portuguese universities, where they teach very advanced studies in biology, but also other fields that are related to biology. It was a great experience. At the same time, I also won a scholarship to work at an industrial place at the Tokyo University. And I wanted to do both, although this was apparently impossible.
Right.
But I found a way to do both. And it was amazing. In this placement at Tokyo University, I was not doing anything I was not supposed to do anything biology related, but I also found a way to do it. but I applied techniques that we don't even hear of here in Europe that much. For example, field ion microscopy. But of course, I was doing other sorts of very advanced microscopies that we do a lot and that are more predominant, like TEM, SEM, which is a scanning electron microscopy, one of them, atomic field microscopy. I was doing all that, but I, of course, wanted to introduce the biology spin. So I did that to understand how retinol changes, the atomic groups changes in response to light. And it was very good. In my PhD, my PhD thesis is definitely very linked to the work I do at Mursla, because my PhD topic was, to develop a new platform for cancer diagnostics. So
I see. Okay.
It's a very, looking back, it was a very, very optimistic project. For one person to do it is impossible because now at Mursla, essentially we are doing that, but we have a full team.
Yes.
And it makes things very different. But it was a great experience, the PhD, not an easy one again. But I remember a lot thinking while I was doing that, because again, I was doing hardcore biology, but also hardcore, nanotechnology, everything. I remember thinking like, how can I even ever apply this to any workplace that I go? Because I mean, at the moment I'm like a jack of all trades, but even on my CV, this doesn't sound nice, because people would not see me as a biologist, would see me as, I don't know, something in between so many different categories.
Right.
But I was very worried, to be honest. But at the same time, I co-founded a company during my PhD as well. This was a social media app. I was CEO, called Ephemera. And I did that because I felt I needed to develop skills other than just the scientific skills.
Yes.
And it was an amazing journey. And yeah, eventually I came around in 2015 with the term exosomes and extracellular vesicles.
Yes.
And by chance, MD Anderson came to my university. MD Anderson is one of the most respectable hospitals for cancer treatments in the US, and also are leaders in research in cancer biology.
Yes.
And they came to my university, and I was actually at the time looking for a place besides Portugal to do the final parts of my PhD thesis. And they went to my university looking for collaboration. And I went to a meeting, which was a public one. I was amazed by the things they did, but there was another meeting which now students could not go into. It would just be PhD advisors, etc., to decide projects, things like that. But my PhD advisor, he was not there. Because he was also very busy. He was traveling somewhere else. So I asked the president of my university if I could attend the meeting, because I was so interested. But he said, no, you can't. It has to be the PhD advisor. But I wasn't happy with that. I really wanted it. So I waited for the MD Anderson people to pass by the corridor. I introduced myself quickly, explained what I'm doing, what I wanted to do. And they put me in contact with a professor at MD Anderson.
Yes.
And that's where exosome started in my life. I went there, which again was not easy, because I think when I started working with that, and also with the new platform that I had developed, it was a new field, but again, amazing experience being in the Raghu's Kalluri group, which is Raghu Kalluri is one of the experts in the fibrosis and cancer, and also in extracellular vesicles, exosomes in cancer as well. And it was an amazing experience being at MD Anderson.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Yeah, not 1 or 2 years after, I was at Mursla, and things there is a lot more to say.
Of course. And I want to talk about the time with Mursla, of course. There's something I wanted to pick up on. So usually there's a portion of this conversation where we talk about what's the advice you'd give and what are the things that you'd learn. And I normally let those come from the person I'm speaking to, but there's just a couple of things you've said that I think will be really useful for people. So there were a few occasions that you mentioned there that ended up being quite pivotal in your academic career, where things were not supposed to be able to be done, or you weren't supposed to do the thing, or you weren't allowed into the meeting, all those sorts of things. But you found a way to make it happen, or you found a way to get the result. And I think this is a really important point to focus on. It sounds like this is something that is kind of a little bit part of you.
Yes.
But tell us a bit about that. Tell us a bit about your thinking around those situations.
Yeah, honestly, I think that is well for me. It was important and is something I apply at Mursla. But yes, that can definitely change someone's career for sure. And talking about advices related to this, something that I've come to realize is that we cannot rely on others to decide what's best for us.
Right.
Of course, we may find advisors, mentors, etc., who honestly do that for us, and probably they do, but they have their own life. They're not always gonna do things for you. So you really need to look for yourself and try to find what is your path and try to push for things to come your way. Because if you don't, you should not expect that others will do for you. So that's first principle where I would say it's that I think people should embrace if in the right occasions. Of course, not all occasions can be that way, but
you've got to pick the right battles, right?
Yes, definitely. Yes.
And you know, I'm sure there are occasions. I'm sure there are people listening who've had occasions where they think, I should do something about that, and they haven't for whatever reason. You know, maybe they've decided it wasn't the best course of action, which is fair enough, or maybe they just couldn't push themselves to do it.
Yeah.
In the latter case, any advice there, as you know, if there's something you know is important, any advice on pushing yourself to go and do something about that?
Yeah, embrace being uncomfortable. I think. This is easy to say, I know, but. For example, I was never comfortable. I was so anxious in these decisive moments. It was not easy, but you know, you really need to try. And it doesn't mean you have to do it all the time, because I also missed opportunities that I know maybe I should have applied, maybe this or that. But I think that you don't need to be 100% perfect on this, but go out there. Don't be afraid. It will be challenging. It will make you anxious. Maybe you think you cannot enter in that or obtain that amazing scholarship because reasons X, Y, or Z. But if you don't apply, you'll not get it for sure. Try it. And no is a guarantee, but I think it's also important to be fine with this, that a no can come. Also,
right,
I think this is important, because if we try and never obtain the results we want, that can lead to a lot of frustration. And I think there is a lot of being able to accept that not everything is going to work, but hopefully one will, and that's still good enough to still trying to be uncomfortable and push for things. And as we do this more, they will become easier and easier. Yes. Other things that are as scary or even more scary, they will start being less and less scary. And it's also, I cannot say it is an habit, but it's something that you also build in yourself, and continues with you for the rest of your life. But I think first step is be uncomfortable, but try it.
Yeah. And you only need a handful of these moments that go the way you want them to go. To transform your career, right? It doesn't have to be every time you try that it works.
Exactly. Yes. Definitely. Yeah.
It's interesting. I used to work for a guy who he talked a lot about, especially with. So we were a sales team, and with new people to the team, he talked a lot about what he called the cringe zone. And so this was the zone in which people found it uncomfortable to ask questions. So for some people, that might be asking people questions about their salary or their family, but they're things that you need to know to do the job effectively, right? Or, you know, it might be when there are difficult situations. And he always talked about, you know, every time you enter that cringe zone, it gets a little bit smaller.
Yes.
And the amount of things it covers reduces. And every time you go in, it gets smaller and smaller and smaller until it almost disappears. Eventually, you just don't have it anymore.
Yeah, perfect analogy. Yeah.
But yeah, he was really big on that. And I think the same applies.
Yes, indeed. Yeah. No, it is definitely what I experienced, and I feel there are many others that can share the same.
Yeah. The other thing you mentioned there, I think, is really important to highlight is that over the years, I've spoken to some people who've said things to me like, "Oh, the company aren't doing a very good job at looking after my career."
Yeah.
And I tend to put it more gently than this, but my response to them is always, it's not their career. Exactly. And this is kind of what you were saying, right? It's your career to take care of, so you take care of it. You go and make sure the things happen that you want to happen.
Yeah. Of course, for example, in my position, I try to look for everyone's interests.
Of course, yeah.
But I'm not a mind reader, for example, and it is difficult to look to be fair, or at least in other people's eyes, to be fair all the time. And maybe you are being fair, to be honest, but maybe you aren't. But as a person who wants to progress in their career, they need to take action indeed. Otherwise, things might not go the way they want. It's as simple as that. As simple as that, and may not be because there's bad intentions from the supervisors, etc. It's just things didn't go that way. But if you push for it, there's a chance they will.
Yeah, and you obviously see it from the other side as well now that you have a team and you're looking after them, and you sort of touched on that. I think, if you've got a good boss, if you show that you're really serious about your career and you're willing to push yourself and you're willing to do the things that you need to do to progress, a good boss will always go out of their way to help you to progress, right? And they'll find opportunities for you, and they'll put you in situations that will develop you, and they'll help you with that. But I think you've almost got to show that drive first, right? You've got to show them that they can do that for you.
Yes. Something I do is I don't ask for anything that is extremely impossible or difficult that I would not be able to do it myself in terms of effort or, not related to experience, but in terms of the hard work. And this is something now I'm not in the lab because things progress, but before I used to not ask anyone to do some crazy experiment till 9 if I wasn't doing it myself.
Right.
So that to show that, also to show a level of respect, and that, it's okay. Sometimes there are hard times, but it's okay. And, I can do it, and I'm not going to ask of you anything that I wouldn't do it myself.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this is important, so that people can also feel that they're not being misused, if that could be even a thing.
No, absolutely. And that kind of leads nicely onto your journey with Mursla, I think, in that, you joined the company in the early days as a senior research associate, so very hands-on and helping to build the technology yourself. Tell us a bit about sort of the things you've learned in that 6 years, or the things that have been most important to you in your development into moving into a CTO position, which, as you said, is a very different job than the one that you started out in.
Yeah. Well, I think is something that is important is to being able to manage different conversations with people at different stages, first of all, and be diplomatic in the sense that you have to respect, first of all, when things don't go your way, because not everything will go. And I remember something I used to do in those early days is, for example, if the founders and I were not in agreement in going into a certain direction, I remember saying, okay, I cannot convince you guys in any way, fine. So I'll do what you say, and on top of it, I'll do what I think. And then,
right,
and then we see maybe they were right, or maybe I was right, but I felt that something else needed to be done, and I did it not minding the extra hours, but that's also part of my personality, that sometimes, I don't mind pushing, but I think sometimes it's really necessary. If you want to progress in your career, you need to do more than your peers, because you need to stand out. So if you want to progress, and there are times when hard work needs to work hard, but also being diplomatic is very difficult. But for example, in this situation, I could have just said, okay, I'll do it your way, and then it would have led nowhere if they were not right. Or I could be insubordinate and just go my way, and that would create a huge problem.
Exactly.
So, it's trying to find, okay, what is the best course of action, which I think I had a help from my PhD, because this was intense on this, because in fact I did my PhD in 6 institutes, so I led with many different kinds of people, many different ways of thinking. So I was kind of trained in this, when there is no agreement, okay, there must be still a solution where everybody is happy. And this is something that was very useful to me at Mursla, because it also builds credibility, and this is what you need to progress. You need to be seen as credible, but also someone that people can trust on you, that you are not simply going to do something completely independent that is not within the company books. But at the same time, if you are right, and it doesn't mean that you need to be right all the time, but the more you do, there's a higher chance some of those things are right. And that just means that, okay, this person can think critically, is not afraid to explore new territories, which in a startup is fundamental. You have to embrace this, that a lot of it is exploratory, not everything is going to work. A lot of it doesn't work, but that's how it is. And I've honestly, this is something important. Also, soft skills, to being able to progress from senior research associate to head of biomedical engineering to CTO. You need, or not only in this example, but to progress in your career, you really need to develop your soft skills. You may be the most brilliant scientist, but if you don't know how to engage with people, or because it's not just engage in a certain level, because most people can engage with their friends, with their partners, etc. But it's a bit more, there's a bit more nuance in how you interact at work, and learning how to do that. And this is something that I would advise anyone who wants to progress that needs to develop, because just being a brilliant scientist is not sufficient to go into a management role.
No. And I think, a lot of that, you've touched on it there. So a lot of that sort of more advanced communication, a lot of it's predicated on understanding the other person, right? And that's also a really fascinating puzzle to try and solve.
Yes.
But you go on. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to mention that to me, that is also related to building trust. And that comes with different individuals, and you will always have more trust in certain individuals than others. And also your communication with certain people will always be different. But you need to be able to adapt to those different circumstances, but also try to build trust in others and of others from you. This is also a main point, because you might be brilliant, but if you're slightly insubordinate, or if you're not, if there is something that is still not quite right for the management team, there is a difficult chance for you to also progress. It's not that you need to please your boss. That's not what I'm talking about, but is show that you are reliable. For example, show that if you want to follow a certain direction, you actually do it in a way that actually makes sense, and that you are able to communicate that, how you did it, how you approached it, why it was a good hypothesis, even if the results are wrong.
Yeah.
But this builds trust, credibility, and it's what is key to also feel, okay, this person is accountable. This person can be taken to a next level. So,
yeah, absolutely. And I think it's interesting. It's something I realized about this recently. So my son is 7 and he plays football, and I coach his team.
Oh, nice.
Several of us coach the teams. And one of the things I've noticed is that they have some really talented players on the team. There are some of them that I cannot put in defense because I can't trust them to stay there. And then there are some of them who are not necessarily the best players, but I can trust them to stay there, and they will tackle people when they come through, and they are reliable. I've noticed this recently, is that it's the same players that they always go to do that. And they're not necessarily, as I say, always the most talented, but they're the reliable ones. They're the ones who will do what they've been asked to do.
Yeah.
And I think that kind of carries on through you.
No, exactly. And I think this is the fascinating thing about soft skills, is that you don't need to even practice this at the job. There are many situations during your life where you encounter the same problems, but in different situations. And I think it's very important to engage with the world, because that can only reinforce the way we interact with people.
Absolutely. Now, there's very briefly one thing that you mentioned that I think is a very simplistic concept, but I think is important to mention, because I think there has been, over the last several years, I'm sure you've seen it as well, there's a bit of a backlash against hard work. And, you know, I think that there are elements of that have some value, right? I think working hard without thought is a bit pointless, and just working hard for the sake of it isn't very valuable, and working hard just because you need to put in the hours for presenteeism is not useful. But at the same time, I personally don't know anyone in any field who is successful who hasn't, maybe they're not necessarily working hard all the time now that they are successful, but they have at some point done that. And this is something that you mentioned that is kind of part of who you are as well.
That's a very good point, Tom. And that is something that we actually take serious here at Mursla. Work hard does not necessarily mean putting the extra hours, although it's an example I use because I did that. But work hard could be simply within the set amount of hours you have. Look less at your phone, look less at Facebook, find techniques to be more engaged with work at specific times. Be smart when to read emails so that you don't get distracted all the time. Be smart with your time. And for example, that is what I do now. I've come to learn as well how to do that, because maybe when I started at Mursla, I really needed the extra hours to get some things done. But maybe now I could have done all that in from 9 to 5, because I know better techniques and how to get things done. And it does not necessarily mean work extra hours. And I also don't emphasize that here at Mursla, that if you want to progress, you need to work extra hours. But what I say is this: you have to work smarter. You have to find the ways so that this is done, because that's again, it's a way to progress or differentiate against your peers. Especially if you can do a certain amount of work from 9 to 5, that's even more impressive, because it means you have excellent time management skill, which is
and I think people underestimate that is a skill, right? And the example could be that you go into a company and you're early in your career and you look at the CEO of the company and you think, well, they don't work that hard. They work sort of in the day, and they come in late sometimes and they leave early sometimes. And, there's a couple of things I think with that is that, first of all, they're probably doing a lot of work that you don't see. And secondly, even if they were to work from 10 till 2, they could probably achieve so much more than some other people, because they've developed those skills. They've developed the ability to leverage. They've developed the ability to do the important things. They've developed networks that they can tap into, and the sort of influence that they have allows them to be more effective in that time. I think people underestimate that is something that, if you are 25, 30 years into your career, you've had a lot more opportunity to develop those skills than at the beginning.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I totally agree with that. And I feel it as well as a consequence of the developments I've been having at Mursla. That yes, maybe as a consequence of my position, but I don't think it's only that. I think I've learned as well how to just be more efficient. But of course, I have a larger network than I didn't have before. I am able to, in a few amount of hours, to do a lot more than I was able to. But still, I think the same principle applies to people that are still progressing in their career, because we can all learn how to be more efficient with our time. And maybe work is not going to be as fun because you're going to be more focused all the time. But if that's what is needed for you to progress in your career, at the end, if you think about it, is more important, because you can provide better to your family and so on. Maybe that is something to ponder if it is important, which maybe it is more than having flexing a few hours during that work.
Yeah, absolutely. So to finish us off, Tomas, tell us a bit about what's next for you all at Mursla. What does the coming year hold for you?
Yeah, that is it's a very exciting year for Mursla. So we are analyzing patient samples at this precise moment. We are discovering new biomarkers in the disease I mentioned in the beginning, and we are not long from starting to develop diagnostic tests.
Fantastic.
But yes, we need. This is what is going to happen till the end of the year. By next year, we intend to raise our Series A, which hopefully will take us to a different level from where we are now. And from there on, the idea is to expand to different markets and enhance the technology in various ways as well.
Yes. Well, it's an exciting time. We wish you the best of luck, of course. Thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thank you so much, Tom, for the invitation.
Thanks very much for listening. Careers in Discovery is sponsored by Singular, helping you to build a brilliant biotech company. Biotech leaders spend far too much time, money, and energy on hiring and people issues. Head to www.singular-biotech.com to learn how you can recruit and engage your team more effectively so you can focus on developing medicines, treating patients, and saving lives.